surge at the border, that he will take action.
The president also mentioned yesterday the idea of getting rid of immigration judges at a time when there are already record backlogs in immigration courts. Why would he want to get rid of judges when they're the only ones who are helping people get through the process legally?
Well, I think the president is showing frustration at the process in general. We have these huge backlogs, this very complicated process that requires months, if not years, for people to actually be processed. And during that time, because of loopholes in our legal system, these illegal immigrants are allowed to basically run free in our communities, in our country.
So is the answer to then get rid of judges?
Without proper vetting, without knowing exactly who they are, and that creates serious dangers. In terms of getting rid of the judges, again, the president's frustrated at the current system we have set up in its entirety. There's massive loopholes, there's massive delays, it's not working, and when you have a huge surge like what we're seeing right now, you're seeing it get overwhelmed.
The president also said he's cutting off aid to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. This is aid that goes to security, to programs to prevent young people from joining gangs in the first place. It's been credited with reducing violence in these countries. Why stop the aid?
Because I think what we're seeing is that most of the illegal immigration is coming from 3 key countries, and those countries haven't been willing to work with us to stop that. This aid has not stopped this massive immigration. We're seeing hundreds of caravans, each of which have over 100 people in them, swarming our border. So I think what the president's seeing is that we're sending lots of aid down there, but we're not seeing results or accounts, and that's just stopping the immigration flow at our border.
So does he think that by not giving them aid that he's going to get better results in terms of making people not want to flee these countries and come towards the United States?
I think what the president wants to do is make sure we're not throwing good money after bad, that the president is protecting taxpayers, is protecting Americans, to make sure that every single dollar is being used to protect them.
What if it leads to an even bigger migration crisis, though, because more people want to leave these countries?
Honestly, we're seeing historic surges right now. They caught over 4,000 people in one day. They're expecting over 100,000 people in a month. This is a massive, massive crisis. I understand that you're saying that there could be even more, but I think what the president's saying is we're already at an extreme breaking point now. This aid has not helped with that, and we need to move forward to make sure that we're solving this crisis that we're facing.
Do you think it's possible that the president will reverse this decision about cutting off the aid, as he did with the decision to close down the border this week?
Well, again, I don't think the president reversed anything. I think the president made the option available, that he may do this and is considering it, and I think he's standing behind both options, both cutting the aid and closing the border. I don't think anything has been reversed or taken off the table.
That is Adam Kennedy, who is Deputy Director of Communications and Deputy Assistant to the President. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Well, let's pick up on President Trump's call to cut aid to 3 Central American countries. Yesterday, we spoke with an advocate of aid who says most of it goes not to governments, but to churches, charities, contractors, and it works. Now let's bring in Anita Isaacs, professor at Haverford College in Pennsylvania. Professor, you agree that ending the aid will make things worse, that some of the aid works, but you want changes, like what?
So I'd say a couple of things. I think that some of the work in terms of anti-corruption and violence prevention are extremely effective. The major problem is with the aid, which is about half of the aid, which is distributed in terms of economic development and poverty alleviation aid. And the problem here is that we follow a pattern of distributing aid or having that aid being channeled through major foreign contractors who distribute this aid in very large tranches, very large packages, basically dumping it on community organizations and ignoring the capacity of these organizations to absorb that assistance. We need to increase aid and restructure the way development aid is distributed by listening to communities rather than come with already sort of defined programs about what kind of development aid is needed within the communities.
But then how do you pressure governments?
The governments are indifferent to whether or not the poor sectors of their society receive development aid. And in fact, they benefit from the migration of their citizens to the United States because the amount of money that migrants contribute in remittances is either the first or the second largest contributor to the gross domestic product of these countries.
I have to jump in with a stat that you have, which is astonishing. You say the 500 million or so in aid, down from about the 700 million that the Obama administration sent to these countries in 2017 was less than 3% of the money they received as remittance every year. So as you say, they have something to gain by programs not working and people fleeing violence and poverty.
Absolutely. They have everything to gain.
So how do you change that? If you say, yes, restructure the aid so it better goes to communities, how do you cross over that firewall and somehow make it impact the governments there?
Well, the problem is with the nature of the governments. We have a promising new election in El Salvador that promises to bring an untainted, centrist kind of maverick into office, and there is every reason instead of beginning by denouncing the country to try to find ways to work with him. The other two countries, and the country I know best is Guatemala, are run basically by organized crime, corrupt criminal operations. What we need to do in these countries is to pressure these corrupt regimes by publicly denouncing corrupt members of the business community, corrupt members of the government, corrupt members of the judicial system, and also to revoke their visas to the United States. Something that's really important to understand is that the powerful and wealthy within these countries live large segments of their lives in the United States. The idea of denying them entry and seizing their assets in the United States would go a long way to really lighting a fire under them towards rethinking the corrupt and criminal practices that they're engaged in.
Well, and as you write, Congress is already pushing this. They have revoked visas of corrupt public officials and business people.
They have, but they have been doing that because they've been able to gain a little bit wiggle room within a State Department that is preoccupied with Venezuela, in my view. And so this is not a stated policy. They've been pushing this, but the Trump administration isn't on board. And if the Trump administration really is interested in curbing migration from these countries, then it is right to shine the spotlight on Central American governments. Cutting aid is not the way to do it because these governments don't care about whether or not aid is distributed. But twisting their arms by preventing them to visit their houses in Miami or wherever else they live is a means of changing the stripes of these governments. And until such time as these governments assume their responsibility, we're going to continue to see mass migration from these regions.
That's Anita Isaacs, professor of political science at Haverford College in Pennsylvania. Professor Isaacs, fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
The acting head of the FAA, Daniel Elwell, says pilots should have known how to override the software system linked to two deadly crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX. Some pilots say he's wrong.
I really can't agree with much of what acting director Elwell stated.
I'm Ari Shapiro. The debate over pilot training and whether that was a major factor in the crashes this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Join us for All Things Considered at 4 today on WHYY.
I'm Sharon Brody. In the first address to Congress by a NATO head, Jens Stoltenberg today acknowledged serious divisions within the alliance, and he called for bigger defense budgets to cope with global challenges such as Russian assertiveness, the core reason NATO was created in Washington 70 years ago this week. Police in Oklahoma are investigating after racist, anti-gay, and anti-Semitic remarks were found spray-painted on a Democratic Party office, a nearby school, and an art center in Norman. Similar vandalism occurred last week at the State Democratic Party headquarters in Oklahoma City and the Oklahoma City office of the Chickasaw Nation. North Carolina's Republican Party chairman is relinquishing party control as he faces criminal charges that he and a major donor tried to bribe the state's top insurance regulator. Robin Hayes will give up operational control to a regional party leader. You're listening to Here and Now.
You're listening to Here and Now on WHYY at 119. Ahead in about 15 minutes, we'll get the latest on Amazon's move to cut prices at Whole Foods. Then, infectious disease specialists say medieval diseases like typhus and the plague are returning. Stay tuned as Here and Now continues on 90.9 FM, WHYY, your NPR member station.
Supporting WHYY Rosemont College announces the Machines, Minds, and Morality Symposium Friday, April 5th from 8:30 to 1. This symposium includes experts from various technological fields and features David Farber as keynote speaker. Known internationally as the grandfather of the Internet, Farber is currently co-director of the Cyber Civilization Research Center, Keio University, Tokyo. No ticket required and open to the public. Information and registration at rosemont.edu/symposium. Funding for Hera Now comes from WBUR Boston and your NPR station, and from Staples with print and marketing solutions for business, including color copies and presentations, booklets and manuals, signage and banners. More at Staples stores or staples.com. Staples.
This is Here and Now, and let's pick up on politics with our political strategists. Joining us today are Maria Cardona, Democratic strategist. Hi, Maria.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. And Alice Stewart, Republican strategist. Hi, Alice.
Hi, Jeremy. Great to be here.
Great to have you. And let's start with the president's sort of reversals, I guess you could say, this week. Last week, he renewed his push to repeal Obamacare. Now he says he doesn't want to do it until after the election. He said last week, as we just heard, that he will shut down the border with Mexico. Now the White House is sort of backing off that threat. Alice, does he risk anything by making these big declarations and then a few days later stepping back from it?
Well, if history is any indication, no. This is par for the course for what this president does, and in his mind, he views this as a way to start the conversation. And look, he campaigned, and many Republicans campaigned on repealing and replacing Obamacare, and that is something that Americans want with regard to fixing and correcting our health care. It's just the question is how to go about doing this. I think his announcement or decision to say he's going to close the border is extremely problematic. I also think cutting off aid to the Northern Triangle is a problem. I've seen the benefits of aid to the Northern Triangle, and it needs to remain. I've seen USAID in action, and if he does move forward with cutting off the aid, it will have the reverse effect with regard to people coming up into this country. It will create greater instability there, and people will leave the country. So I think a lot of this is him starting the conversation, and that's important. But I don't see major changes with regard to some of these proposals that he's putting out there.
Well, Maria, how should Democrats respond to these things?
Well, I think they're responding exactly how they responded in 2018, which is thank you, President Trump, for making healthcare yet a big focal point going into 2020, because it is what allowed us to take over the House of Representatives in 2018. Look, healthcare continues to be the #1 issue. And frankly, I hope Republicans on the Hill have healthcare, because they're suffering from whiplash in terms of what this president has said publicly and then has reiterated that he's going to go the opposite way, and then saying, oh, he's not going to deal with it until after the 2020 election. But regardless, he has handed Democrats, frankly, the issue that they were going to run on anyway in 2020.
Well, Maria, actually, that brings me to another question about the Democrats, because we don't really know right now where they stand, especially because there are so many presidential candidates who want to, differentiate themselves. But we don't know where they stand exactly on health care. Senate Democrats unveiled a health care plan called Medicare X, which would make Medicare a public health insurance option, but it's not Medicare for all, which some are pushing for.
Right.
What do you think of where the Democrats are on healthcare right now?
Well, and this is, again, why I thank the president, because he actually has handed the Democrats a blanket issue that they can all run on, which is protecting the Affordable Care Act. And then, yes, if they want to talk about Medicare for all in terms of the next step, that's fine. But right now, what Americans see is that the Affordable Care Act is in jeopardy. And the majority of Americans support the Affordable Care Act, including the majority of Republicans. In fact, there was a poll this morning that said 9 out of 10 voters do not trust Trump at all, nor Republicans, to take care of America's healthcare system, and they trust Democrats. So again, thank you, President Trump, for unifying the 2020 candidates going into the 2020 presidential in terms of protecting the Affordable Care Act and ensuring that Americans, all Americans, especially those with pre-existing conditions, are afforded the protections that they need.
I think it's really, if I can just say this, Medicare for all might sound great to a lot of those on the left and Democrats as a campaign talking point, but that is government-run healthcare. It is a single-payer system that is not sustainable and that does not provide Americans with what they want. What they have said for years they want greater access to care. They want lower deductibles. They want to keep their doctors. If they like their doctor, they want to keep it, which has not been the case. And they want quality, affordable health care, and they're not getting it right now. And so no matter how the Democrats want to call it, it's simply not sustainable, and Americans do want something different.
They want the Affordable Care Act, which the president now wants to take away. So, thank you, Trump.
Okay, now let's talk about the Mueller report and the Barr letter. Now, the House Judiciary Committee voted this morning to give the chairman, Jerry Nadler, the power to subpoena the Justice Department to release the full Mueller report on the Russia investigation, which we will say found no collusion and didn't rule either way, really, on obstruction of justice, according to the Attorney General. Nadler told reporters he would not negotiate on what's redacted.
The committee must see everything, as was done in every prior instance. Obviously, some material will have to be redacted before it's released to the public to protect privacy, to protect the various rights, but the committee is entitled and must see all the material.
Now, there's not going to be a subpoena right away. They're giving the Attorney General more time. Maria, why are Democrats holding their fire on demanding the full Mueller report now?
Because I think they do want to give this Department of Justice and this Attorney General the chance to do the right thing, even though knowing that he is somebody who came into this job with a very strong political point of view against the Mueller investigation and for almost complete authoritative executive power. But having said that, we're going to give him some time, which I think is the right thing to do, but with the understanding that the committee should see every single piece of this report. They should understand what was behind Mueller's findings. That way they can actually do their job of oversight, which frankly in the last 2 years of Republican leadership in Congress has been non-existent.
Alice, do you agree with that?
And frankly, the majority of Americans believe that the Mueller report should be seen by the public.
I think they're entering into troubled waters here. Look, I don't understand why their hair is all of a sudden on fire about releasing this report. Barr has said he is going to release it. He has said that certain information does need to be redacted. So they're continuing to pound their fists on the table and threaten subpoenas is really unnecessary. And the rate to which they continue to throw out the word subpoena every time someone gets their pizza toppings wrong, it cheapens the process. And we need to wait. We need to let Barr do the correct redactions. As we all know, they need to protect the classified information, the sources and methods, people that have not been indicted, as well as information that needs to be protected. And Barr is doing that. He has said so. The president has said that he wants to do that. They need to just calm down,
the president
be patient,
now,
and let this legal process take its course.
The president has now walked that back, and he does not want this report out, and I think there's a reason for that. I think he knows that there is danger there for him. But look, what we are saying is that don't let America, the whole public, see an unredacted report. No, the committee should see it. Everybody on that committee has the proper, classifications in terms of being able to see classified information. So they should see it. There's no reason to redact pieces of it for the committee. Then they will ensure that the proper redactions are made when the report is made public.
Okay, let's move on to 2020 in the few minutes that we have left, because there's a lot to talk about. And starting with the former Vice President Joe Biden, 2 more women have come forward to claim that he touched them in a way that made them uncomfortable. That means 4 women have now accused him of that. And at a Politico forum yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi weighed in on what Biden said and what he should say.
So to say I'm sorry that you were offended is not an apology. I'm sorry I invaded your space.
Now, Maria, you've joined other Democrats such as Pelosi in saying this hasn't been disqualifying for Biden in terms of getting into the race. What do you think now?
I still think that's true, but I've also qualified that qualification by saying that it all depends on how he answers these questions, because he's going to continue to get them. He does need to acknowledge that his actions, no matter how innocuous and innocent they were, and I do believe they were innocuous, Ronquios and innocent, but he needs to acknowledge that those actions made women feel uncomfortable. He needs to acknowledge that, apologize for that, and say that he is going to check his behavior from here on out.
Alice, here's President Trump joking about these problems with Biden last night.
I was going to call him, I don't know him well. I was going to say, welcome to the world, Joe. You having a good time, Joe?
So, Kellyanne Conway was on one of the Sunday talk shows over the weekend, and she was talking about creepy Uncle Joe, which sort of brings up the old phrase about people who live in glass houses not throwing stones. I mean, this is President Trump, somebody who bragged on tape about grabbing women.
Right. And look, I think there's no comparison here. I've gone repeatedly on record saying that the words that have come out of this president's mouth are disturbing and should not be tolerated. And look, inappropriate touching, inappropriate language to women that makes them feel uncomfortable is not right. And it's not about the person's intent, as Joe Biden has said. It's not what they intended to do. It is how these women feel. And I'm glad we're able to have this conversation. And it's important to realize, while this is wrong, the behavior should not be tolerated. It's like getting a speeding ticket. Going over the speed limit 5 miles an hour is much different than going over the speed limit 55 miles an hour. And I think we need to take each and every one of these instances separately and individually. Joe Biden, in my view, is someone that should be respected and has a long history in politics. I don't believe this is disqualifying, but it is his decision and his family's decision to make as to what he does moving forward.
And I agree with Alice on this. And frankly, before Kellyanne talks about this again, she needs to remember that she is working for a self-professed sexual predator in the White House right now.
Okay, well, I guess we'll leave it right there. But thank you so much to both of you. Maria Cardona, Democratic strategist, Alice Stewart, a Republican strategist, and lots to talk about as this race for president goes on. Some fundraising numbers coming in. We will discuss it all in the coming days. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
You're listening to Here and Now.
You're listening to Here and Now on WHYY. Lori Lightfoot has won Chicago's mayoral race in a landslide, beating Democratic Party leader Tony Preckwinkle. Jeremy Hobbs will have more on Lightfoot, an African-American openly gay former prosecutor who's never held elected office. That's at 1:50 on WHYY. Stay close.
WHYY, the Wistar Institute presents the Helen Dean King Award on April 24th, honoring Dr. Mary Claire King, a National Medal of Science winner and discoverer of the BRCA1 gene that is a known cause of breast cancer. Dr. King will discuss her career identifying genes responsible for inherited diseases such as breast and ovarian cancer and using research as a tool for humanitarian work. Details at wistar.org/Helen Dean King 2019.
Supporting WHYY, Walnut Street Theater's The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. After 15-year-old Christopher is wrongly accused of a crime, he sets out to investigate on his own in this heartwarming adventure. Now through April 28th, walnutstreettheater.org and Pennsylvania College of Technology, offering diverse majors and an average of 3 hours of lab time to each hour of lecture. Hosting an open house on April 6th for an opportunity to visit and learn more. Details at pct.edu.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston. From Babbel, a language app that teaches real-life conversations in a new language, like Spanish, French, or German. Babbel's 10 to 15-minute lessons are available in the App Store or online at Babbel, BABBEL.com. And College Vine, using data to provide personalized college guidance. Admissions advisors help high school students apply to college based on their chances of getting accepted and receiving scholarship awards. More at collegevine.com.
This is Here and Now from NPR and WBUR. I'm Jeremy Thompson. Amazon says that as of today, shoppers have seen lower prices on some items at Whole Foods, which Amazon owns. This could reflect Amazon's attempt to lure more prime members to the grocery chain without any For more on this and some other corporate stories in the news today, let's bring in Cherise Jones, national business correspondent for USA Today. Hi, Cherise.
Hello.
And we recall that Amazon acquired Whole Foods for $14 billion back in 2017. It bought Prime members with Start.com because when I go to Whole Foods, maybe I spend $100 and get $1.50 off my Prime savings. So what's going on here?
Yeah, that's the big complaint. I mean, you're actually supposed to get an extra 10% off of everything on sale as a Prime member. But basically, they're saying now that, Prime members are going to be able to get double the deals they used to get every week that are exclusive to them. And that's going to be in addition to hundreds of other items on sale for everybody that walks into a Whole Foods store. So the whole point is they're trying to get people to give them another chance because prices have been creeping up again at Whole Foods. There's a lot of alternatives at this point if you want to get organic products and goods.
So what kind of price cuts can we expect?
We're talking about an average of 20% off, and it's going to be primarily produce, so fruits and vegetables. You can get a pound of organic asparagus or strawberries for 99 cents instead of $2.99. So again, they're really trying to make another play. The third big price cut they've had since it was purchased by Amazon, but because those prices were going in the other direction, people kind of feel there was an okie doke there. So they're trying to lure them back in and saying, you don't have to go to Walmart, you don't have to go to Aldi's, you can get some good stuff here for a lower price as well.
We'll see if they're for real this time. Meanwhile, in other food-related news, we learned this week that 2 airports are canceling their deals with Chick-fil-A. That would be Buffalo Niagara International and San Antonio International Airport. They say the chain is not welcome in their food courts. Tell us more.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A is incredibly popular. There's one that just opened a few blocks from my office and everybody's clamoring to go. But it's also incredibly controversial. They have a foundation, Think Progress, that's given money to organizations that are considered anti-gay, anti-LGBT. And their chairman has said that he's against gay marriage. And so the San Antonio City Council and the New York State Assembly, some of their members said that it doesn't have a place in these airports. Chick-fil-A says that they don't have a political agenda, but there's a lot of critics who disagree.
And do they have a legal backing? Do they have legal right to do that, to say you can't be in these airports?
Yeah, I mean, airports have a right to say who they contract with, absolutely. But it's interesting, in Texas, the state attorney general, who happens to be a Republican, has launched an investigation because the mayor of San Antonio has said that his criticism was that Chick-fil-A is not open on Sunday, and he feels that that's going to impact revenue, and the state attorney general says that this might infringe on your right to religious freedom. So we might yet see a Chick-fil-A at the San Antonio airport.
Okay, just a couple seconds here, but we saw that Caterpillar, which is a bellwether for the global economy, saw its stock downgraded by Deutsche Bank this week. Why?
Yeah, it's been a perfect storm. Economies are struggling a bit in Europe and in China. The United States is oversaturated with that kind of equipment. But it might be a little bit premature, so we have to see. But in the meantime, they're saying they're cool on Caterpillar.
Charisse Jones, National Business Correspondent for USA Today. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Here and Now.
How do you persuade rival political tribes to get along?
There is no better sight than when I look out and see a group of Republicans and Democrats who sit in a couple of rows together, laughing together.
Workshops around this country are trying to accomplish that, inviting voters with different views to meet and talk. Practicing civility on the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
Join us for Morning Edition from 5 to 9 tomorrow morning on WHYY.
I'm Sharon Brody. The House Judiciary Committee today voted to give the committee chair the authority to issue subpoenas for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's full Russia report, its exhibits, and any underlying evidence or materials. Democrats are pressuring the Justice Department to release the documents to lawmakers without redactions. The Justice Department today issued a harsh report on Alabama's prisons, saying the state is violating the Constitution by failing to protect inmates from violence and sexual abuse and by housing them in unsafe and overcrowded facilities. The department gives Alabama 49 days to correct the violations or possibly face another federal lawsuit. U.S. health officials are investigating whether electronic cigarettes can trigger seizures in some people who vape. The FDA says it's reviewing 35 reports of seizures among e-cigarette users, particularly young people. You're listening to Here and Now.
Supporting WHYY, Penn Orthopedics. What if you were able to do things you haven't done in years? Like building a fort with your grandkids, or simply taking a nice, long walk. With advanced treatments for hip and knee arthritis and a personal patient navigation team with you every step of the way, the Penn Orthopedics approach to joint pain is designed to help get you back to enjoying life again. Appointments can be scheduled online at pennmedicine.org/joints.
This is WHYY.
Supporting WHYY, Mount Cuba Center, a beautiful botanical garden in Hockessin, Delaware, invites listeners to the opening of their spring season. Beginning this Wednesday, visitors can stroll through gardens of native wildflowers, grow their knowledge in classes, and enjoy family-friendly events. Mount Cuba Center is open every Wednesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. To learn more and reserve tickets, mtcubacenter.org/WHYY. That's mtcubacenter.org/WHYY.
Funding for Here and Now comes from WBUR Boston and Home Advisor, matching homeowners with home improvement professionals for a variety of home projects, from minor repairs to major remodels. Homeowners can read reviews of local pros